for us to just speak at you all. But if anybody is on this line and in our community and wants to share, you know, their sentiment as Africans living on the continent or folks in the diaspora, like the floor is open for you all to do that. Hey, Raja.
Hi, Cherae. How you doing? I know how you're doing. Don't tell me. I know. I know. It's a time of tragedy. It's a time of pain. It's a time of anger. I know. I know how you're feeling. I know all of us here, there, everywhere. We're all very angry. We're all very upset, and we all know why. And yeah.
I mean, it means the world. I mean, it's funny. Like, I was even thinking about us doing this today. Usually we're like DJ'd out and ready to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, even it being Republic Bar and like all the sentiment into why you all created that space in Ghana. Like, what are you feeling as a Ghanaian
As a
living in
Ghanaian,
Ghana,
yeah.
but a convener of people?
I mean, well, as a Ghanaian, and I believe I speak for all Ghanaians, you know, all like-minded Ghanaians. We're tired. I mean, it's a time of tragedy, and we're really tired of this. Like, I'm sure everybody around the world is also tired. We're just sick and tired, really. It's something which, you know, it's been happening recently. It's been this oppression of the black man or the black person, for that matter, has been happening way too often quite recently. Let me speak for myself personally. It's something which it doesn't surprise me. You would think that as time advances, you know, post segregation, post black liberty rights, etc. You would think that as the time advances, you would think that there will be some, you know, level of normalcy, some level of balance between, you know, whites and blacks as far as our rights and, you know, obligations are. But apparently it just gets skewed by the moment, you know, and it just makes you very angry, you know, as a black person in general. Being a Ghanaian, our knowledge of, you know, oppression and white supremacy in America was, you know, post segregation was really brought to light when we had this was it Rodney King, the issue of Rodney King, you know, because that's when CNN had really come into Africa, and to have those visuals of such, you know, sabotage and such, you know, mercy, lack of mercy, you know, brutality was quite an awakening, you know, period, you know, amongst all of us, you know, just to know that this is what's happening in the United States of America. Well, now we know with the internet and everything, we know exactly what's going on. So it's shocking every day when you see these visuals of oppression and visuals of evil. You know, it's scary. You know, the world is not that globalized. The world is not really leading towards, you know, at least. And sometimes you wonder, is it because with the internet reporting is getting more and more, like more information is getting across, it's getting around all of us. Is the frequency of occurrence escalating or increasing, or are things just getting as bad as it looks? You know, these are questions we ask ourselves, and it's scary. You know, it's worrying, and we're all very angry. It's amongst our friends and peers here in Ghana. We're talking about it. We are mourning with, you know, the family of, you know, and it's terrible. It's sad.
I just want to say, like, it means so much, right? Like, to even have a space. I'm looking at folks in the comments from Nigeria, from all over the continent, and there is something to be said for at least knowing that you're thought of, you know, in this time. And I think there's something you said about Rodney King that I think is really interesting, right? So, see, prior to that, most people probably assumed like America is land of opportunity. You know, that whole brand.
It's a template.
Yeah. It's and then Rodney King and mass media becoming the way in which, you know, folks on the continent are learning about what's happening in the world. And I guess even now, like with this mass media sharing what's going on. How are people consuming this information? How are people processing it in Ghana, especially like post year of return, where you had everybody in Ghana, and now we're, here.
Right. Well, let me just give you a brief background of how we consume information here in Ghana. Like just a brief background. I think our internet penetration has climbed 50% over the last three years.
Mm-hmm.
That's an indication of how much and how fast people are actually acquiring smartphones and cell phones that have video and internet capability. So
Mm-hmm.
more and more, your average Joe in Ghana, in Africa, is actually coming into contact with information from the northern hemisphere or from the west,
Mm-hmm.
and like has never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
So prior to which, your understanding or your knowledge of the United States, for instance, as a beacon of human rights and democracy,
Mm-hmm.
everybody here in Ghana is kind of like very shocked at the visuals and like the reportage, as far as white supremacy and police brutality is concerned. You would think it was pulled out from a movie, and people are actually quite perplexed as to, is this the America that we thought we knew? It's very unfortunate. I mean, I love America. I love America for many things, but I must say that a lot of the truths, or should I say, a lot of the hidden truths of America are coming to light. Not just to me, but to most African youth, people. And it's telling a different story. It's giving a different narrative. Unfortunately, a not so good one. And it's painful to reorganize your understanding of that which you thought was the template for a free society, one that encompasses the rights and freedoms,
Yeah.
as a collective, as equal, So it's quite a challenging moment in that sense, as far as how we consume this information.
I'm taking some questions because this is an open conversation.
Right.
I see Owusu Shirley ask, what are you guys' view on not sharing the videos, as it desensitizes and normalizes Black pain? And I think that's something myself I've dealt with. Like, I actually haven't watched the George Floyd video on purpose.
I haven't either.
I can't do it. I mean,
I can't. Yeah.
I think
I've heard
the voice and the sound, right?
And it was not.
I think that it's a double-edged sword, right? Because unfortunately, we live in a society where it's like we're not given the benefit of the doubt. I mean, think about it. And I think one of the things that trips me out is like, do you think when things happen in Ghana, do you think because it is a majority Black country that most people don't like I'll take the restaurant industry, right? So you all run a Black owned establishment, right? But there are many non-Black owned establishments in Ghana. And so I, as an African American, when I'm in those places, I see things that scream out white supremacy to me, that scream out like, this is not just classism, this is white supremacy. But I don't always see it commented as such. And so I was just wondering if white supremacy in Ghana is something that people see or don't really see.
White supremacy is a global phenomenon. Unfortunately, it's not something which, what should I say? It's not something that has its roots in America or in old America. White supremacy is a global phenomenon which has been in existence for thousands of years. I hope you know where I'm coming from, and in many ways and forms. And in Africa, right from the first time the white man stepped foot in Africa, the elements of white supremacy reared its head. Even prior to slavery. Religion is a form of the Christian religion. Or should I say, the imposition of the Christian religion by itself
is a form of white supremacy.
It changes your thinking. It reorientates your psychology. And what that does to you, your sociology, your society, your culture, etc. It's we are feeling the brunt of that right now. It's elements of all of that are actually ingrained in our society. Your Jesus you pray to every day is white. Excuse me. And 70% of Ghanaians right now are Christian. And there's nothing wrong with being Christian, but who do you pray to in Ghana when you enter a church in Ghana? You pray to a white man nailed on the cross right above you, and you worship him. So, I mean, the roots of white supremacy are very, very deep, are very well ingrained. If you consider that Christianity has seeped its way into African Ghanaian culture, that by itself is telling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm listening, I'm reading these comments, and I just want to thank you. I'm looking at DJ Fada, I'm looking at Sadar, like everyone's sharing their own experience. Like this comment that there are times my grandfather told me the white man is God. Like in a culture that's so rich and so strong, like
I know what you mean.
That's a lot, and then to try to, and I think that's why I wanted to like frame our conversation today through the lens of solidarity and healing, because I think that we have to see our journeys as intertwined and intrinsically linked. So like we have to get mad about white supremacy rearing its head in Africa, whether it shows up as ridiculous amounts of foreign debt, that is tied to colonial times and still being paid by African governments. Like that's still white supremacy. That is not purely economic, or it's, African Americans and Black people, period, being harassed by the streets, but it's also even the policing itself. So someone wrote in the comments that they said there was a young woman killed by the police in Nigeria last night. And I think one of the interesting things about that is that we think of white supremacy as only showing up as when white people do something to Black people. But white supremacy also shows up when it's how we interact with each other through systems they've put in place. You know what I mean? So like it also, so even though it may have been, a Nigerian police force person, in this incident, like the whole structure of that police state was not of Africans. You know what I mean? Like it was
you're right.
That whole thing.
You are absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I agree with you. The ferociousness that a policeman today in Ghana would face you if you've done something wrong, a small misdemeanor of some sort, the level of aggression. What stimulates that aggression is the movies you watch. Is the Rambo style movies of police aggression in Hollywood movies that motivate some law enforcement officers here in Africa to behave the way they do, because they think that is the norm, that's the way, that's the yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And it's rooted in the idea of power. So if my idea of power is a white man, over me, I'm going to try to emulate it to get, I mean, don't even throw in like the fact that police are underpaid and just all of those other issues, that come with it. I mean, I think there are just a lot of levels.
Yeah, there are. Your banking system, your business system, like your system of trade alone is not defined by our culture. The way loans are given, the way investment is gotten, the way business investment is pulled together, that culture that we had, the agora culture of doing market, it's all gone. It's a very unfriendly terrain of the richest get richer and the poorest get poorer. It's capitalism. Capitalism by itself is alien.
It's white supremacy.
Is alien. Capitalism is alien to African societies. We African societies, and not just African society, but other like ancient cultures around the world, are by itself socialist in its real sense. Which is very much anathema to the tenets of capitalism. If you know what I mean. Yeah.
That's really powerful, Raja. Like just even thinking about it, and I think so. Thinking about like what we do, right? So I think showing space is already, like, sharing space is already powerful. There are a lot of conversations happening about this, but I'm excited to just even feel you from Ghana. And I know the people commenting in, like, can feel that as well.
Right.
What do you see as an opportunity for us in this? Like, you know, dismantling white supremacy is an entire ordeal. Outside of that, where is the opportunity for us as Africans and as Africans in the diaspora? How do we use these moments to, I guess, educate each other, and enlist ourselves? And then, like, you know, what do you think it looks like? Like, what could it look like?
Right. I mean, before I start, I think I would say that as time goes by, unfortunately, and I hate to paint a very morbid picture of our existing reality at the moment. I think we live in a very wicked world, and it's getting more wickeder by the moment. And that's a variable which we're having to contend with, in as far as shaping the way we want our society globally to evolve, or how we are going to arrest the elements of evil that are have their hands over us. Those are challenges that we're going to be facing, and how we deal with all of this. But down the line, I think it's 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 a time for us to educate ourselves of the predicament in which we are. It's time for the young people to really discern into a lot of the history of what is happening. That it's time for us to discern into the history of why we are where we are. It's time to look at the social science of
Mm-hmm.
that explains, and that breaks down, or should I say, deconstructs exactly the system we're living in right now. We need to understand things from a very systemic position. We need to
Mm-hmm.
understand things from, I don't want to use the word academic, but we have to really break what is happening down. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to go to school for that. We need to educate ourselves, as you said, about the causes, the, the issues of, like, the levels of power play that are in this. We need to
Mm-hmm.
understand what white supremacy is about. We need to understand what power structures that are over us are about. We need
Mm-hmm.
to know what the agenda of people and entities are. We also
Mm-hmm.
need to know our power fundamentally. We need to understand and know what our power is in this whole equation,
Mm-hmm.
without which we cannot know exactly how far we can go.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for not just people in the United States, but people all over the world.
Yeah.
Because they're existing. The strongest claw of white supremacy is it goes beyond you know white policemen being very wicked towards African Americans.
Mm-mm.
It's
It's the
about that
fundamental
super
structure in which our world operates.
exactly, and we
and
need to
and
look at
we
the
have to
system.
unplug from it first. Like, we
Right.
cannot expect, like, even the most strongest ally, right?
Yeah.
The strongest ally. Not all white people are bad. This conversation is not meant to say that at all. But what it is that, like, people can be the beneficiary of white supremacy even if they don't subscribe to it personally. And I think we have to do the undoing of white supremacy within our community first. I think if, as long as, I mean, I was reading a comment earlier about, like, the American standard and Africans being dependent, and this is not just from a psychological perspective. It's the wallet, it's aid, it's all of
Yes.
these
Yeah.
systems. Like, I don't even need to ask. I see a lot of people asking why the African Union hasn't made a formal statement. Why, the president of Ghana? Because if they make a
Because
statement,
because our leaders even forgot it was African Union Day 3 days ago, and some African presidents in Africa were not even, like, sending, even recognizing the fact that it's African Union Day. I mean, people forgot.
yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah. So I think this, like, why aren't people saying something? The obvious answer is because the economy
We
and our
don't own our
well-being.
economics.
Yeah,
You know.
like the like you say something against America at a time where you're trying to get funding to fight COVID in your community, XYZ. We've got a president in America who literally used the word looting starts, shooting starts.
Yeah,
This morning.
I thought I was
morning.
dreaming. I thought I was dreaming when I saw it. I was like,
this morning. So do we think
and
that
that's where
African
we have
leaders
to be careful
who come out and say something are not going to face that wrath? And I think that's a real dilemma. It's the same dilemma that I think African immigrants who come to the U.S. and are trying to figure out how to like make this quote unquote better life here. It's a dilemma of why they're not aligning with African Americans when they get here, because they have to make this decision between alignment and Black solidarity. At least there's a false idea that is the decision. I don't think it's the reality. And I think that's changing, but I think that's the belief that there's a either or proposition.
I'm sorry, it just so happens that the same white supremacy system has made and shaped our minds to elect and ensure the wrong kind of leaders we have in Africa. And that just goes for the whole entire continent of Africa. You know, I have hope, though. I do see quite a more discerning African youth that is more aware, more in tune, and is claiming its own, claiming their own. You know, so there's an element of hope there. People, the young ones are more radical, they're more brave, they're more in need of action than my generation, for instance. You know, so I'm a bit hopeful that things, you know, and that the younger youthful generation, they want results. You know, the internet generation, they want results. So if you can deliver, get out. Otherwise, we shall deliver for ourselves. You know, and you know, that may be a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing more than it is a bad thing in a sense that you need to own what is yours. You need to own, you know, you need to own you. You need to own your environment. You need to own your economics. You need to own your resources. And that mindset of thinking of fending for yourself, knowing very well no one's fending for you, you know, is fast becoming very much the mentality here in Africa. You know, you need to fend for yourself. You know, but before we had the extended family system, which capitalism has rid away. So people are now more, in one sense, inward looking, you know, trying to protect your own individual self. But in a way, it has its benefits, as in like, you know, demanding what is due you, because, you know, right.
What do you think is possible? Like, what do you think is possible even in the short term? I was looking at this image. So the flyer I put out for this conversation today actually had my friend Hawa shared it. Hawa is Somalian, and she shared this image of Somali women protesting for the release of Angela Davis. And apparently this protest happened in Mogadishu in 1972. And I saw this image and I was like, in the age of social media, what does that look like? What does that look like for Ghanaians to gather at Independence Square? You know, now, like, what is that? That image just really struck me. I hadn't seen it before. Literally, I saw it 30 minutes before this conversation.
Wow. I can't wait to see it myself. Really.
It really, for me,
I think,
was powerful, particularly in Somalia.
Right, precisely. I mean, yes, it was a different Somalia then, but it says a lot about Africa at that time. It says a lot about the solidarity between Black people here and there, you know, or there and here, you know. What do I see? I think, you know, and I don't mean this from a religious standpoint. I think there's a certain awakening which is going, which I know we all feel around the globe. There's a certain global awakening which will unite all of us. It is why white supremacy in all its forms is very desperate to undermine, you know, all of us here in this globe. You know, the superstructure will fall, and yes, the revolution will not be televised,
but it might be Instagrammed.
Thank you very much.
It might be Instagrammed. I mean,
exactly.
I'm looking at some of these comments, and one, I just want to say you all are incredible. It's Friday night, and the level of comments and feedback and genuine questioning that I'm seeing in the feed is just incredible. I see one person said, like, we did it against apartheid, we can do it again. And I think that is absolutely true. So it wasn't just in the 70s, it was also in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
But
that wasn't that long ago. That was 30 years ago.
I think this time it will like be more on a global scale, more than it has ever been. You know, because we people have power, and it's time for us to take our power from the global elites, which are the biggest form of representation for white supremacy.
Yeah.
And it's about that time. The young people are more aware. We all know what's going on. And it's time for all of us to unite our efforts and bring an end to this. And the only way we can do that is if we inform ourselves about the issues, the theory and the practicalities of how this world actually really does work. It really boils down to that. At the end of the day, we need to be informed about these things, bit by bit. And I think because information is power, and information is key to your solidarity, to your freedom.
Yeah.
So it's a time of awareness. It's a time for education. It's a time for learning, and it's a time for action.
Yeah.
And I believe, what do I see? I believe we will. People better be on the lookout because. Yeah, solidarity. He's
like,
on
yes,
it.
We need action.
Action, baby, action.
Sorry, I'm trying to and there's no mute on Instagram Live. You can't even mute yourself. You guys just have to be hearing the dogs screaming. Sorry,
the dog's feeling the spirit. Feeling the spirit. He or she agrees. Is it he or she?
Well, they're both boys.
Okay, all right. We have.
So we have a question here from Maliki that I think is super relevant, and I think it's important to answer. The question here is, where can we get the information? And I think that's such a poignant question because we're also in the age of rapid spread of misinformation, rapid spread of false information. And I think that I would love to hear your take on just resources.
It's not difficult. It's not difficult.
But where do you think? What are your books? What are your places?
It's very simple. The forefathers have laid it down. The theory, the literature review, and the theory doesn't change. The rhetoric will not change. The dictums will not change for the next how many thousands and thousands of years until we evolve into, I don't know, some other type of beings. We are human beings right now. Our forefathers are human, have wrote them, they've thought them, they've wrote them, and they've thought them, and they've taught them, they've written it. Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, Sheikh Anta Diop, all of them. Nothing any of these fathers have said has an expiry date, as far as I'm concerned.
So it's not even about some new thing. It's like it was already written.
All there. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Kwame Nkrumah, Kaunda, Sheikh,
Lumumba,
Mandela. It's all there. It's all there.
I was saying to someone that I think referencing Year of Return again, I think that one of the missed opportunities in Year of Return was not going deeper on the messaging. It was come party, come have a good time. But we needed that too, though. We needed the aspirational narrative around the continent to really take hold. We really, really needed that. And so I'm not even mad at it. But I think the opportunity now is since so many people have eyes wide open, it might be time to revisit these works. I'm even thinking now, maybe we need to start. I'm listening to what Ama Kobina is saying. Hey, Ama, she's saying they gathered to write and think together. And I wonder if that's an opportunity. I wonder if there's an opportunity to use the power of the internet, this convening, all of the stuff that we're doing to revisit these works and to make it, because it might seem easy to you, but I think for a lot of people who are torn between okay, right now in my life it feels okay, but like I know there's this bigger thing. People need to be fed in different ways. I put it that way.
Okay.
One person said, "Hey, South Africa, I love that there's like a whole global Black village right now on the live. Like it's very, very dope. But I think there might be an opportunity to revisit some of these things and to me, that whole sharing of that image in Mogadishu, it makes me want to revisit everything I know about Somalia.
Yeah. There's a lot to learn, and there's so little time. There's no question about it, and that's why organization is very key. In every struggle, um, in every movement towards action, organization is key. And part of organization, one very essential element of organization is information, managing your information. Your information sources, as you're saying, and how you disseminate your information. Some people call it propaganda. No, we need to learn the facts of life. We need to learn our history. You can never know where you're going if you don't know your history. We need, and it's. I have to be honest. We don't really know a lot about our history. Doesn't matter whether you're in America, you're in Africa, or wherever you are.
Yeah.
Because your history books have been taken away from you.
Yeah.
Your culture has been taken away from you, or you have allowed your culture and your history books to be taken away from you. Let me put it that way. Let me not be pointing fingers at anyone. We need to be able to point fingers at ourselves, know where we went wrong, and say, all right, fine, let's pick up the pieces, put them back together, and drink that wine.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing from you that I think about this is that as much as we are calling for, in some ways, the reaction, we're in the reaction right now, right? We're doing this live because we're in the reaction. We're speaking about this in reaction. And I think what I'm hearing from you, and I think I would love to posit this to like the folks joining us in this conversation, is as much as what we need to push for is the change on the outside, there is a lot of change on the inside that we need to do. And I think and it's not to say that it excuses white supremacy, it excuses what we see, but I think to truly arm ourselves, right? Like to truly arm ourselves,
we have to be organized.
We have to organize, and that starts within. I'm looking at Jose Levels Up. Hey, Jose, what do you teach yourself and what sources do you look at? Because it's hard to trust sources. I'll tell a story on that. So my son, we live in upstate New York when we're not somewhere on the continent. And in his 5th grade class, it was time for them to do Black History Month. And I think they were starting Black History Month with like the story of slavery in America. Like that was the kickoff to Black History Month. And now this is at the time, 9-10-year-old boy who spent, a year almost in Ghana. He's lived in South Africa. He's been to Kenya. And so for him, he was just kind of like, our history doesn't start here. And so he was really frustrated by the way in which this history was being taught to him. And so he said something to the teacher. I ended up getting an email from the teacher. But what ended up happening was she reached out and said, you know what? Like I'm literally, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know which narrative to tell. I don't know how to craft this. And so on the one hand, it was frustrating because it was like, why is it my job as a parent to have to point you through information that's readily available? But then at the same time, I was like, you know what though? Like, I do think if someone asks, it behooves me to respond with something practical. It doesn't mean I should do the work for them forever, because to your point, things are out there. But I think when people ask, there is an opportunity to point people into the right direction if there is an appetite for enlisting people. And so what ended up happening was my son and I gave a presentation about the history of Black people, starting with some of the great societies in Africa. We talked about the Akan. We talked about the Great Wall of Benin. We talked about all of those different things. He ended up, after that, giving that presentation to his entire grade. And then the next year, as a sixth grader, when it was Black History Month, they started that whole thing with him from the beginning.
Okay.
Now, and so I think we have to be willing to say it's not okay. We have
I agree. Yeah.
I don't think we should be doing the work for other people completely, but I think us speaking up and creating space to say we're not okay, like we are in this moment, to be able to say this is not okay, and using some of the power we've gained. Because we can't be so satisfied with the privileges we've won that we're so unwilling to risk them to push things further. I know I've done it before. Like, I've been quiet at a time when I shouldn't have been quiet before, because you're trying to hold space. So right. I think, I don't know, I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, what I get from you is that we all have a responsibility, you know, and we need to be innovative and creative in getting information out there, more especially to not just ourselves, but the youth, the younger ones. There's a plethora of methodologies to ensure that becomes a success. Are you going to create cartoons to inform people to build people's awareness? Are you going to use movies? I mean, we have a lot of Black in Hollywood. You have a lot of Black directors and who have really, really changed the game. You know, as we have seen, we are now seeing that this is possible. You know, and there's a lot of collaboration between Africans, Black people all over the world. It's a new awakening, and it's not by coincidence that white supremacy is getting desperate. We need to remember that. You know, when Black people are all over the world, Filipino Blacks, Thailand Black, Australian Black, African Black, when Blackness gets together, that becomes a problem for a lot of white supremacy. You know, not white people, in case other people may be misconstruing me. White supremacy, you know. Because white supremacy really is an enemy not just to Black people, but to white people as well. It's
an enemy to everyone.
To everyone.
It's an enemy to everyone.
Deep. It's very, very deep, you know. So there's different levels to all of this, but we don't need to anyway.
No, this is healing.
Right.
To just create a space, as simple as it is, to create a space for the conversation. It is healing. I want to ask those of you, one, I just see all of your conversations, your responses, but do you guys have questions for me, for Raja? If you're just tuning in, this is Raja. He's one of the co-owners of Republic Bar in Ghana. I'm Cherae Robinson, founder of TasteMakers Africa. But I think that, we usually do happy hours here on Fridays. And we decided to do this as a solidarity and healing hour to just connect and create space. So if anyone has questions, feel free to use. I love that place. Yes, Republic is a vibe. I think it would be cool for you to tell the story of why you chose to call it Republic Bar. I think there's an interesting story there.
For a while, but if I heard you right, you were asking me why, like, what motivated the why we named Republic. Is that what it was?
Yeah, okay. And like, what's the value system behind it?
What's the value? Sorry.
System behind it.
Okay, all right. So essentially, I mean, if we started 8 years ago, and we're Ghanaian. Of course, we definitely are, quite abreast with the happenings of, the rest of the world. So why were we 8 years ago when we first opened? 9 years ago when we first opened? We were actually referring to our clientele, as Republicans. Hey, in our social media posts, we would be referring to all of us as Republicans, and some Americans, Black and white alike, were like, are you sure you're using the right terminology? We're like, well, I mean, a Republican is somebody who believes in the ideals of a republic. And they're like, well, back where we're from, that doesn't really, sit well with everybody. We're like, well, and of course we understand why that's the case. You see, the whole essence of a republic is why we named the Republic Bar the Republic Bar. What does a republic really mean? What are the tenets and the facets of a republic that what defines a republic? Freedom, people power, the ability for people to decide the levels, the kinds of governance that they want to see govern them. It's actually governance of the people, through a conduit that they control. The people set the laws for themselves. The people decide who their leaders are and when it's time for them to stop being their leaders. That is a republic. A republic is a collective where elements of socialism are very much key to its success, ensuring a balance of wealth distribution, etc. These are the elements of a republic. And at the time when Ghana first became a republic, that was when Kwame Nkrumah was first became the first premier, the first president of Ghana in 1957. He changed Ghana to become a republic in 1960, 3 years later, 3 years after independence. Ghana really didn't start being a free country as a republic. It was I've forgotten my history of right here, but it was the state of Ghana. But 3 years down the line, the 1960 Republican Constitution was promulgated. And I think that's the first Republican Constitution. And that is what made Ghana a republic. And the idea behind that is to serve, is to give credence to the various tenets I was telling you about as to how, as far as beginning nationhood, starting off from a clean slate, especially when here in Ghana, you had different tribes and cultures and ethnicities that had to be marinated to become one nation states. The easiest way to achieve that was to be defined as a republic where everybody in there is equal. So the premise of a republic is one that engenders unity, is one that engenders faith in all, is one that engenders progress, and sociology, and very much hinges on the elements of African culture to a very large extent. So that essentially is the reason why. And not to also forget, that was a time when Ghana was at its prime.
Yeah. The golden
1960,
age.
the golden age. Kwame Nkrumah's Ghana was what I want to see Ghana become one day.
And I think, I know we weren't supposed to keep you for 15 minutes, but I just think like listening to the conversation, like reading into the conversations happening in the chat. And one of the reasons I wanted you to tell the story is that I think despite what is happening, Reggie, what great timing. Despite what looks like an impossibility, we have made progress and we can continue to do so together. And I think that we have to lean into what's possible within us. Like, what is our own republic? And what does that look like?
Exactly.
How do we build a global Black republic?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's the thing.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Even if it is in mindset to start.
Precisely. Precisely.
Like how do we take that?
The republic is a mindset.
Yeah.
The republic is a mindset.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Raja. I'm going to bring on Reggie, who has some stuff to share.
Rockstone, you can see me. Grandpa,
thank you.
Thank you so much.